Hi everyone, welcome to
32.
Episode 32 of the 240p Club.
Yeah, we've reached... This is no milestone. 32 is just a regular, average, ordinary number. But you know what? We're recording a podcast this month, which is an accomplishment for all of us. Because we've been so freaking busy. I do apologize in advance, but you know what? We've been busy. I have no excuse.
I had finals.
It's been a month since our last one. I don't think we've been away that long, guys.
It feels like it's longer because I hold myself in my room and just read physiology books all day long. So
I work a lot.
Compared to our previous, high, this is nothing.
Yeah, this is a habit like we're trying to break now. Like, honestly, to be perfectly frank with you, loyal listeners, we weren't even really going to record tonight, and then, Ray kind of got the ball rolling. It's like, yeah, we should definitely record because, so I have tonight and then I'm literally working the next 12 days straight, which leaves me no time to record, so we basically just had to get this done. I'm going to edit this as soon as it's done, and hopefully we'll have it up by tomorrow, if not, a few days after. It's just, uploading it's nothing as long as it's edited, so it's just, we're going a little behind the scenes here, but last time we finished our podcast mentioning swatting, actually, and we wanted to go into that briefly. It's a topic that doesn't deserve more than 5 minutes of our time, though, because it's such a stupid thing, yet it's a plague that's hitting a lot of Twitch streamers. I recently went online, and I go online every day, so that's nothing new.
Nothing new.
But I came across a video, one of the Twitter pages we follow. They've run a Twitch, and apparently, they're from the UK, so apparently right in the middle of their Twitch, the cops start knocking on their door, and apparently someone called in, there was like something grisly going on in their apartment, and, someone was in trouble, maybe like a pedophile ring, I don't know. But someone reported, quote-unquote, an anonymous tip. Apparently, it was a viewer that decided that this was going to be hilarious, and they basically figured out where they were broadcasting from. I'm not exactly sure how they did that, but after you basically narrow it down to an address, you call the local police department there, and they dispatch someone. The video was a little condescending because they were talking about how if this happened in America, they'd be shot, which they're completely full of shit there, but at the same time, I could see that happening at one point. A Twitch streamer is just minding his own business or her business, streaming, playing some games. All of a sudden, you hear the police kick the door down, guns drawn, and this is live on the internet. Meanwhile, the person that called in the tip is laughing their ass off at someone else's misfortune, where basically they're getting cuffed to the ground and, no explanation why. Ray, what, this is fucking ridiculous. I mean, I'm gonna just flat out just go on like a cursing tangent here. This is ridiculous, this is stupid, goes well beyond spamming. Where did this come from? Where did this originate?
I don't know, probably just some, dumb kids who wanted to play a prank or whatever and get the police to show up on some streamers they hated or whatever. I'll say this, there's a streamer named Darkside Phil. He's very infamous. I'll just leave it at that. And the fact that he got swatted once and his, haters were coming to his defense and saying that shouldn't have happened, that says a lot about how fucking ridiculous swatting is and how it shouldn't happen ever.
I know some of it came out of the Call of Duty scene when people lose against someone on the opposing team. I've heard a lot of stories where this is with a lot of the shooters, especially Call of Duty, Battlefield, etc.
So basically, it's just catering to the dumbest of the dumb there. Mm-hmm. And, basically allowing some of these people to, instead of, sending a profanity-laced rant towards whoever beat them, or, threatening them in real life, like, I'll kick your ass in real life, and you're like, kid, you're halfway across the country and you have no way of getting to my apartment.
Do you know how they get their addresses from that? Because some people have their, some gamers will have their, phone number, their credit card account attached to either the Xbox, Microsoft Network or the PlayStation Network, so they can have quick access to purchasing things on the network. So their opponent, let's say they're playing Call of Duty and you have someone on the other team and they're mad that this guy shot him 3 times. Like, you've taken 3 of my lives, or someone's taken 3 of my kills. So they'll go underneath, they'll find the guy's username, and then they'll look into their profile, then they'll hack into whatever information that they have on there, and that's
how this got started.
Yep.
Yeah, so
it's really sickening.
Yeah, we could go talk about this all day long. I mean, it's sickening having, people basically threaten you with violence, like a string of 10-minute obscenity over a game. Number 2, finding their credit card information and stuff and trying to get, quote-unquote, revenge on them that way. But the worst of these offenders is B, actually coming to someone's house, or, in this case, swatting, where they call the cops, tell them, this person's a violent criminal, etc., and have them come over and watch during their stream and watch them get handcuffed and, crackle with glee. Now, we're retro podcasts, this shit didn't happen back in the day, but that's no excuse for not covering it. However, I think as a socially conscious person, what should be done about this, we could talk to her blue in the face about how entirely wrong this is, how this should be, have a stigma attached to it where this is beyond one of the worst things you can do to someone. But there are some sick fuckers out there that play video games all day long. Some people that are so desensitized to violence that even shooting in a game, they get so pissed off when they lose. And then these are the types of people that have no qualms about committing violent crimes in real life. But there's no, we can't connect one or the other. I mean, some people are just born this way. You can't blame the game. We're not the thought police here. But, something like this is not reaching those people. It needs to reach those people. Cops need to have some sort of training on what this is and why, number 2, it's a waste of time and ways to combat it. I can't picture the average small town police force having the technology to go track down whoever made that call and then file legal action against them. Number 2, it's hard because some of these people aren't even in the same country. You have people from the U.S. calling in for threats somewhere in the Ukraine, and just obviously they might not respond to something like this, but But obviously, that's the only way to combat it. Basically, give police certain amount of training on what it is, what needs to be done when you get a call that potentially could be swatting. And number 2, this is some new ways in the future. Eventually, have ways to track down who made certain calls to report a crime like this, and turn it back on them. A few of these kids that do swatting, they get charged with crimes and go to jail. That makes an example. That makes people not want to do it as much. But again, we live in the age behind the anonymity of the internet, and people can lobby threats as much as they want, and people don't know if they're serious or just trying to be a troll, shut things down because they don't like the person.
And also, if you're a big name streamer listening to this yourself, because I've been acquainted with big name streamers before, and I've warned them about this exact thing. You need to know how to deal with the police if if you get swatted and they end up showing up in your house, because you need to.
There's a list of things to do, when the police knock at your door.
Show up, go with a surrender pose or whatever, with both your hands up, not showing any weapons.
But it's hard to do that, too, when you have no idea the police are coming. Usually, most police forces, they'll knock at the doors, the police, open up. But, you can have some stupid friend fucking with you. You might be streaming from a dorm room. Oh, this is the police. Basically you want to punch a friend in the face.
I was just thinking, because that was exactly what happened in a Dark Side Full scenario. He just happened to hear the police, with a loudspeaker outside his house. And, yeah, he came out with his hands up and everything was hunky-dory,
Yeah. But, here's the thing, and not to get too political, what if you're a streamer of color? I hate to put it that way, but there are certain police forces out there that, with, let's just say, and again, I'm not trying to get political here because there's many, many different facets to a lot of social issues that showing up on Facebook, reading Facebook is not going to give you. You have to look into basically every facet of every situation. But with that said, there's the off chance that, hey, you basically try to swat a black streamer or, someone like, some sort of different race other than white, they come out, the police shoot them. It's happened, I think, actually, hasn't it?
I believe there was a story up in New England it happened, and the one who was shot was actually a white man, if I remember.
Yeah, but
it was about Halo, I believe.
They came out and the police shot him. Yeah, over swatting. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's so many aspects of this, but people are still going to do it based on the anonymity of the internet. The only way to solve this problem is give the police the tools in order to crack down on this. And also, you got to convince certain police departments that this is a serious problem. You can't just show up at some streamer's house, tackle them, beat the crap out of them, put them in a holding cell for 24 hours, and send them home with an apology.
Oh yeah, no, that's just
you can't do that.
You can't. There should be proper avenues of training. Yeah,
there should be a ton. But then again, we live in a society where, you can train the police all they want. The first time they see a 12-year-old black kid, they're going to shoot him because he has a toy gun. But again, we're getting political. Let's go away from that to more happy topics because, we could talk about this till we're blue in the face. It's not going to solve anything. I've said my piece on it.
Yeah, I think it's time to move on. And speaking of objects in the hand, what about controllers?
I like the way you transitioned that there.
Controllers, accessories.
Yeah, this is the happy part of our podcast.
Things that you manipulate a game with.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's a good Jeopardy category there. There you go.
What is
the NES Advantage? Anyway, we'll go into that. Basically, once you unbox your Nintendo, your Super Nintendo, you got 2 controllers out of there. Sega Genesis was the first system to only include 1 controller. And then the trend kind of went there. You bought your GameCube, it had 1 controller. Bought a PlayStation, 1 controller out of the box.
I remember my Super NES having 2 controllers for some reason.
Yeah, that's what I said. The NES and the SNES both had 2 controllers. The Sega Genesis only had 1. But yeah, they said the Genesis was started that trend of, hey, only 1. Well, actually, no, I'm lying there totally. TurboGrafx 16 was released before that, and that only had 1 controller, I believe. No, that had 2 controllers. TurboGrafx 16 in the United States had 2 controllers. So yeah, it was the Sega Genesis that only had 1 controller, but we are getting way off topic there. The point is that once you open that console, it came with a controller. You thoroughly enjoyed that controller. You've probably thrown that controller across a room several times. Unless it's a PlayStation controller, which case you're out $50-something to replace it.
That's why they need stress balls.
When I was a kid, I chewed through some of my NES controllers. That's kind of sad. Yeah.
Spiked the controller like a football on the ground. Thanks to Ninja Gaiden, I am sure I am not the only one that has done this. However, that controller still worked for quite some time. Here's the thing, though, with NES controllers, they were cool. Once you looked at, your Game Pro or your Nintendo Power magazine or whatever, you went to your friend's house, your friends had this controller, it had, oh my god, what the fuck is this on here? It's got a turbo button. Oh my god, I don't even have to button mash. I just hit the button. So, oh my god, he's fiery. Yeah, this is so cool.
And then 6 months later, suddenly that controller doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, Ray's got a horror story with certain controllers like that. I know the feeling. I bought a Sega Genesis controller that was a third party, had turbo buttons. I spanked my way through a couple games thanks to that controller. Then all of a sudden the buttons didn't work anymore. This happens with a lot of controllers, a lot of third-party accessories, but, in celebration of third-party, and actually first-party, because Nintendo and Sega put out some good peripherals. We're going to discuss our favorite controllers, our favorite peripherals, and some misses of this that seemed like they'd be an awesome idea, but now, in retrospect, we have to laugh at them. The one I'm thinking of that we're going to laugh at, of course, everyone knows, is it's so bad. The Power Glove, of course.
Oh, yes. Yeah, way to surprise me and put me on the spot, right?
So anyway, the Power Glove
Woohoo!
is so bad.
It's pretty terrible.
It's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, if you ever watched the movie The Wizard, you know, and Fred Savage and his brother, you know, they had the main antagonist guy, little kid named Lucas, who was just as good at video games, and he busted out the Power Glove and he showed him playing Rag Racer, you know, like, but that's not how the Power Glove worked. Also, it was made more for Punch Out. You know, that was the big selling point. It's like, hey, you swing your fist, and hey, little Max swings his fist too. But oh no, you have to kind of program it with these ridiculous amounts of buttons on the side.
Also, boxing kind of requires both fists, so yeah.
Yeah, and plus it was really hard getting little Mac to dodge using that, which you needed. And plus, what happens when you want to use a Star Punch? You have to look at the button on the thing to hit the button, you know.
God.
It was just
way too much work
it was incredibly awkward. It was a good idea done horribly, and Nintendo actually would not get that right until the Wii came out and those Wii controllers. But anyway, Ray wanted to go way back, wanted to go into the Wayback Machine, so why don't we talk about some of the first controllers?
Yeah, the first... I mean, if you want to skip that Fairchild Channel F, which was fucking ridiculous, the Atari 2600 controller, I mean, it was pretty simple. You had, like, basically a joystick with one button on, like, the upper left-hand side of the deck or whatever. I mean, it was pretty awkward, but if you held it the right way, it served the purpose for the time. I guess it helped that also, when I was a kid, we had ball that went on top of it that made it more like an arcade joystick, which made it a little bit easier to manipulate.
Let's also throw that back to the fact that some of the first computer joysticks were very similar to the Atari joystick. I know the one in particular I'm thinking of course, is the Commodore 64, which my cousins had, and that joystick played just like an Atari joystick.
And then suddenly you get to the sort of next generation with the ColecoVision and Intellivision and Atari 5200, which their controllers were awkward, and that's putting it kindly. I'm not sure exactly which console had the bright idea to put a numeric pad on their joysticks, which was way too complicated for the time, and basically just for most games, you just use it to set the difficulty and nothing else.
I think for a lot of these, they were selling points for, you know, a marketing team. It's like, hey, we have this button, and this button on our controllers. That's more sophisticated than what this system has. So, you know, that's how that started. But as time has told, you don't need many buttons to manipulate a great game. Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, had a controller, you used the start button, and the 3 buttons on the Sega Genesis, they all did the same thing. It's jump, you know. It's basically, you manipulate it with the D-pad, you only needed one action button.
The Atari 5200 in particular took it a little too far, because it had, not only did it have the numeric keypad, it also had a pause button, which, to be fair, was unique for the time, and an analog stick, which broke down very easily, and it wasn't used for very many games anyway, like Star Raiders, I think, and the port of Star Wars, which, to be fair, was probably pretty good. None of my analog sticks for that system I've lived long enough to really judge if that's...
Yeah, but I think, durability is actually a good factor into some of these controllers. I know, obviously, the old adage, they don't make them like they used to, kind of holds true.
5200 in particular had a very flimsy, like, flex circuit sort of thing.
But didn't a Sega Genesis controller fit inside that? Like, later on, like, you know, if you had...
it fit into ColecoVision, not
ColecoVision, that's what it was. Yeah, I know. Eventually, like you had, you know, some of these systems, if they were just sitting collecting dust. You know, you wanted to just be like, hey, I want to play this, you know, again for whatever sadistic reason. You know, torture yourself some of these hard games. Mm-hmm. You probably break it out. You don't have a controller for it. Oh my God, the Sega Genesis controller works. which is genius. Yeah, let's get a little off topic though. We'll go to the next generation after that though. The most iconic controller of all time. Everyone to this day, even if you do not own an NES, you know what a Nintendo Entertainment System controller looks like. They were square, you know, it had 6 buttons, well 5 buttons. It had A, B, a start, a select button, and then it had the D-pad. D-pad was an innovation at the time. I believe Nintendo actually got sued over that due to unpaid royalties after a while. However,
from where?
I read about it in a video game magazine from, I say around 93 came out. I'm not sure what corporation it was or actually the follow-up to that suit.
Didn't Gunpei Yokoi invent the D-pad actually?
Supposedly they got it from the technology from some other corporation. Supposedly, because I don't know how that lawsuit panned out. But I'm also not really sure about the technology, because if you look at it, that technology was used in every subsequent video game system since. So I'm sure, you know, all these companies aren't paying royalties to Nintendo for, you know, use of the D-pad on their consoles. Like, you know, the Sega Genesis, the Sega Master System had a D-pad, and, you know, they weren't paying royalties to Nintendo.
Probably because the Sega Genesis had this awkward, like, sort of diagonal things in the middle. It was sort of like a web D-pad. Yeah, it made Battletoads a pain in the ass to play, I'll say that much.
Battletoads for the Genesis?
Yes.
Actually, I like that version a little better than the NES for some reason, but again, off topic. Yeah, we're talking about video game peripherals, you know, basically someone got sued. I'm not sure what happened with that, but the long and short of it is, at any point past an NES, every system since then had their own version of the D-pad on there. Even the next modern systems that use analog sticks more than the D-pad does, the D-pad still has certain functions in certain games. Like, I know for Skyrim, I believe you can map them to select certain weapons. Although, you know, obviously I had more fun playing that game on the PC because it just felt right playing that with a mouse, you know. But, actually, we'll segue into mice at that point. When exactly did the mouse become a viable controller?
Mario Paint.
Mario Paint is a good answer.
I'm only saying that for the consoles. Probably Macintosh is when it first became viable, but...
Yeah, but actually, I'd say, yeah, with the point-and-click genre. There's a reason why it became the point-and-click genre. But, like, more modern games, you know, especially shooters, me personally, from playing Quake, you know, Quake 2, where the mouse manipulated the aim of your gun, that's where the mouse became a lot more viable controlling a first-person shooter than a controller did. And also... The WASD thing that you're thinking of didn't actually become commonplace until, like, Half-Life, I believe, in 98. Well, no, Quake 2 still had that, where you can aim. I remember rushing over from school and playing tons of Capture the Flag tournaments. You know, just basically I had a list of like 40 servers, something like that, dedicated servers. Just type in the server IP address, and then bam, you're connected. You get put on a random team. You're playing Capture the Flag. You can aim your shots. So there's one particular shot you really had to aim, like on one of the maps for Capture the Flag. Like it was a sniper point.
Even then, I don't remember being at the default control scheme in Quake 2. Like, it was buried someplace, I believe.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, you did have to dig it out a bit, but that was the first one I could recall that used the mouse exclusively. I know Quake 1, you used the mouse as well, but Quake was... it was a different engine than the Doom engine, but at the same time, it made more sense to use a controller, I thought, with Quake than it did with... and Doom, than it did with Quake 2. But again, we're going off topic here. We're talking about consoles and the Mario Paint peripheral for Super Nintendo. Brilliant thing. Basically you have a kid, you want to occupy them for a couple hours, put them in front of Mario Paint and just have them create shit. It was fun. It came with its own mouse, a little mouse pad. which was really cool. Basically, if you've ever followed Homestar Runner, which is, strong bad emails, one of the first things to go viral on the internet, back in the 90s, that was initially created using Mario Paint, and they basically just hooked it up to a VHS tape and recorded it. It was really cool. But yeah, mice haven't, aside from PC gaming, I haven't seen a successful use of a mouse peripheral for any console system yet. And honestly, I don't expect to see one based on the how far analog sticks and stuff have come, where basically you could get pinpoint precision. And also the Nintendo Wii with, their... And now the Switch, the Joy-Cons, where you can just hold them in the air, and you just see a mouse go across the screen like a mouse pointer. So. And
based on the Telltale series now, they're point and click, but you just do it with the analog.
Yeah, so technology has advanced, but back in the day, so Super Nintendo, that was a cool concept put out in the NES Super Nintendo mouse. It's terribly underutilized, except for Mario Paint. I don't recall anywhere else that used it. Speaking of terribly underutilized, both the NES. I don't know, my personal NES, when I bought it, well, my parents bought it for me for Christmas, I cracked it open, and it had 2 controllers, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt on the same cartridge, and the Zapper light gun.
The Zapper.
The Zapper light gun is heavy. You could probably use it as a blunt object if your little brother was trying to take the controller. I was the little brother in my household. My sister didn't play video games, so...
Joe had the original gray one. I had the orange one growing up, unfortunately.
I don't know about unfortunately. They worked the exact same, and they were both the same weight. I've held both. I know why they did the orange one, to make it look less like an actual weapon, but...
Though, to be fair, I do have the Japanese version as well, which looks like an actual revolver.
That's creepy. It was a cool peripheral, and
this is something you could never get away with in North America, by the way.
Oh yeah, I know. It was a cool peripheral. Nintendo did support a lot of their peripherals early on. You had the light gun. You had Robbie the robots.
Which I still don't have either. Which
basically, it only worked, I think, with 1 or 2 games, and all it would do is keep pressing the B button. That's really like what Robbie was good for. You also had the power pad, which was ridiculous. It was supposed to be, you hook that up. You could basically control the game with your foot movements. It had a bunch of new number things. Basically, you needed some nice floor space, and also we figured out how to hack it basically because it registered touch really lightly. You didn't really have to stomp on it. So we used to just for track meet, just hold on, and then the best way I could describe it was like a double bass pedal. It's just where we would just slightly tap it, but the thing would be triggered to the point where it would be like we're running ridiculous speeds.
Either way, if you're in an upstairs apartment, God help you if you try to play this.
Yeah, there's a reason why no one attempted that peripheral until DDR came out.
No, don't talk to me about DDR.
Yeah,
I could go on.
Yeah, that had its own peripheral, but yeah, those are utilized peripherals. Nintendo was trying to market itself as an entertainment system, not a video game system, thanks to the video game crash of 1983. So we had a couple different peripherals. The light gun was used extensively for a while. It had a lot of cool titles released for it.
Rob was the highlight, though, I believe. Even though he only had 2 games that worked with him, they really marketed the hell out of him until the NES had enough units to need to advertise him anymore because they could just sell their games.
It led on to the Super Nintendo. By this point, Nintendo had a firm grasp on the video game market in the United States, and Sega kind of took some of their thunder with Sonic the Hedgehog, but that's beside the point. The Super Nintendo came out with did Mario Paint for the with the mouse, and then they decided to come out with their own version of a gun, but you had to buy it separately, and it was called the Super Scope 6. It was this giant, like, bazooka-looking thing, and it registered things a little differently than the light gun did. The light gun registered, I'm not exactly sure how that worked, but it worked fine with CRT TV. The other one, I think, used more infrared in order to, pick out the target. But I could be wrong about that.
You had to put something into control port number 2 and then put it on top of your television.
In order to register those, yeah.
Also, you had to put 6 AA batteries into it, which it ate like candy.
Yes.
So I remember I actually had one of the guns, and I was able to use it for Lethal Enforcers, I believe.
Yeah, that was one of the games that supported, although Lethal Enforcers did come with its own gun, which, again, looked like a blue or red revolver.
I think I am pretty sure, because I got it from my cousin, so I'm pretty sure it was blue, and there was a pink one, I think.
Might have been the pink one too. I know in the arcade it was blue and red, I think.
I had the blue one.
Personally, my game was Battle Clash, and I still have pictures of me like beating that as a kid. Like at least me like blowing the scope, like if there was smoke coming out of it, and like in front of the ending screen.
Actually, I'm surprised my parents let me play Lethal Enforcers as a kid.
Yeah, no wonder why you're so violent today.
Oh, that's all just because I have had enough.
You guys want to start talking about some weird shit? How about the Sega Activator?
Oh my god, that thing! Oh, okay. For those of you not in the know, they around 92 or 93 or so. The obviously with the success of Street Fighter 2 and its many reworkings, Champions Edition, Turbo, and once Mortal Kombat came out. Fighting games were everywhere in the mid-90s. They popped up everywhere. And in order to, Prefiel's to market to exclusive fighting game players.
Somebody had the bright idea to just, put a D-pad. Somebody had the bright idea to make a D-pad that was motion controlled. Like, if you kicked in one direction from yourself.
Yeah, it was like this big black, hexagon or octagon or something like that. And, it was an octagon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then depending on, if you do certain movements, like you punch a certain way, your character's supposed to punch. If you kick a certain way, the character's supposed to kick a certain way. I've seen this technology used in arcades, but it was more like a gimmick. Like you seen arcade machine with the activator technology hooked up. So basically you and a friend jumped aboard and you acted like you were actually punching and kicking each other. But to make a serious fighting game run, it was pretty useless. And again, it was basically one of those things, good-mannered parents bought someone that was fighting game addicted, for Christmas or for Hanukkah or just for a birthday or a graduation, whatever. And the kids, play with it for an hour or two and then put it away for a old-fashioned controller. Is useless.
When I was playing Super Street Fighter 2 for the SNES, I would always just use the SNES controller until I got blisters on my thumbs.
Most people did, but obviously, thanks to Atari, basically, having that controller and people moving on to the NES from Atari, certain third-party companies made Atari-like controllers for the NES, and eventually I think some of them wound up on the Super Nintendo, although they were more marketed as a flight stick, for sim games like Fighter Jet Sims.
I guess people didn't really realize the appeal of having an actual arcade stick for fighting games just yet. You had the SNES Advantage, which was an arcade stick.
But it was like a reworked NES Advantage. It didn't exist for fighting games per se, but that's when it became extremely popular.
Mm-hmm.
Because the NES Advantage...
You did have the weird lineup where it was you had X, Y on one row, and then L, B, A, R on the second row. They didn't perfect it just yet, but...
Yeah. But here's the thing with that, too. The NES Advantage was marketed... Obviously, it's one of the most popular accessories of the NES's lifespan. It was marketed by Nintendo. It came out a little bit after the Nintendo got super, super popular. And it was basically, by Nintendo's marketing standpoint, they were just trying to market, the arcade experience at home. which, basically you plugged in the arcade stick, you got TMNT2, the arcade game. You're supposed to, replicate the arcade experience. It didn't really work out that way, but you know what? That controller was great for certain games. Track and Field 2 cannot have been beaten unless you owned an NES Advantage or the, what was that thing I pulled out of my video game drawer before we started this?
The beat a game button?
Yeah!
Oh no!
Yeah, quick
It's
plug.
right there.
Quick plug. We got it right here. Hold on. That little weird noise you're hearing. Those weird noises you're hearing. So this ridiculous thing is called the Quick Shot. I got it at a Funko Land, actually. Kids, ask your parents if you don't know what Funko Land is. They became GameStop now, because they merged with a couple different companies.
It was the holy land of video gaming.
Yeah, it was cool when the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis were out. I used to be able to go to Funko Land and stock up on NES titles for $5 a piece, sometimes $6, maybe some were $7. Actually, I think I spent $1.99 on a title. So, get my allowance. Hey, I wouldn't be able to afford all the awesome new SNES games coming out, but I could stock up my Nintendo collection. But anyway, this Funko Land in particular had about 20 of these Quick Shot controllers and 20 of these NES strategy guide things from Game Players, which is one of their big book things, and they had them all on sale. So it was just okay, every kid that walked in there eventually bought that one, or probably this controller, the very controller I'm holding. The only game I was ever able to make use of with this thing was Track and Field 2, which, again, the NES Advantage did the exact same thing, It's basically you need a turbo and you need something that went 360 degrees. If you go to the Angry Video Game Nerd channel and watch the video, was it Star Wars? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Star Wars. He was playing through. Towards the middle of the video, he has the beat a game button, and apparently this very controller I'm holding is the beat a game button. He's just holding it a certain way so you can't see the start, select, A and B buttons on the sides here. But really cool peripheral. Actually, it turns out to be really useless after a while, but for Track and Field 2, and actually for a few events of Skate or Die, I got my money's worth.
I was making jokes that I can actually use that for modern games like Dynasty Warriors that only uses 1 or 2 buttons. And then all of a sudden they came out with 9, which has buttons for just about everything you can do.
If only it worked with Mario Party. If only.
That would be amazing.
That would mean your ass is getting kicked out of the house for using a cheat button.
Oh, yeah.
We don't play games with Mario Party.
Is it the people with the Mario glove weren't already getting kicked out?
It's a game that ruins friendships, apparently.
So does Monopoly.
So does Mario Kart.
Yes. Mario Kart has ruins.
I don't know, I played you guys in Mario Kart and I don't hate any of you.
No, not any more than usual.
Well, yeah, not any more than usual. The only reason I'm not punching Joe in the face is because I actually can't reach him.
Yeah, she's short.
I have T-Rex arms.
Yes, she does. She takes a swing. It's like, hey, you feel a draft here?
It's like, boom. I can't even get past where Ray is.
Yeah, she does Taekwondo, but yet Taekwondo is not turning you into Dalsim where you can stretch your arm.
As much as I would love that. No, it gives me Chun-Li legs instead.
There you go. Speaking of Chun-Li and Dalsim, Capcom, in their awesome wisdom, decided to come out with their own controller for the Super Nintendo called the Capcom Arcade Fighter Stick. You know what? It actually, in Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 2 Turbo, you had an option to automatically set the buttons. It had L and R on top, and then I think the X button, and the bottom was Y, A, and B. And it set it up just like the arcade. You can just play, using an arcade stick. It was great. However, it was expensive. I was broke. I was just got done telling you I spent $4, $5 here and there on cheapo used NES titles. I didn't have the money to lay down for a controller. My parents didn't either. So you know what I was doing with Street Fighter? I was using the shitty controller that came with the Super Nintendo, which actually turned out to be a really fucking good controller.
It was really good, very durable.
Yes, it was.
And it gave you blisters.
Yes. Speaking of undurable, Ray had a controller that was giving him nightmares before this, and he couldn't wait to express this with you guys and girls.
It was called the Turbo Touch 360, and I ended up getting it at the exact same time as Mortal Kombat 2. I mean, it was novel for the time. Basically, the premise was the D-pad was actually a touchpad instead of a traditional, like, push-down D-pad.
What system did you get it for?
It was the Super NES.
Super NES one. Because it came out at the same time. I remember the ad. It was Rad Video Game Magazines. It was, you had one, it worked great for Mortal Kombat, you know, for the Sega Genesis. That's how they advertised it. Mm-hmm. They came out with one for Super Nintendo, works great with Street Fighter 2, blah, blah, blah. And then the NES one that worked great with TMNT 3. For some reason, I don't know why they used that title.
And I had this controller, and like 3 or 4 months later, the D-pad didn't fucking work anymore. It broke down really easily. Yeah,
a lot of these Prefils broke extremely easy. I didn't buy a touchpad like that because I just knew, even as like a 12-year-old thinking that was the coolest thing ever, you're like, but wait a minute, I have a feeling that thing's going to break. Because my regular controllers break after a while, so why isn't this one going to break? So, you know, it turned out to be, you know, good idea not purchasing that. Speaking of, for fighting game aficionados, they marketed a lot of controllers in the 90s for fighting game nerds. You know, people that were just obsessed with all these fighting games that came out. And, you know, Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, you know, Sega Genesis came out with Eternal Champions. You had, I believe, Time Killers was one. Trying to think of all the other ones. The Ram and a Half, the manga had a fighting game that was released here called Hard Battle. Sailor Moon had a fighting game.
I think Carnal's Revenge was another one.
The last few boss fights in Power Rangers were a fighting game. You know, you were the Megazord, you had to do a one-on-one fighting game style. So, you know, this is one of the most popular genre in the 90s, you know. And like today, kids are nuts about like first-person shooters. Although the fighting game genre is still around, still thriving in Street Fighter V, etc., etc.
I would say that the fighting game genre is definitely more leaning towards like young adults. You rarely see too many. Like, I watch a lot of Tekken tournaments, and there's like one player who's a lot younger than the
So, you know, I mean,
he's really good, though.
The Call of Duty crowd's like more, well, it's varied. I know a lot of people.
It's varied, definitely.
The same with fighting games, I think. But then, you know, back in the day, fighting games were everything. Street Fighter 2 was everything, you know, and Mortal Kombat was everything. Like, these were the top games selling all the time. Not to mention, you know, they had other genres of games that were coming out. You know, they were selling, they were doing good. The top sellers of all, you know, of the SNES and Sega Genesis era, aside from all those Nintendo classics, and, you know, even Chrono Trigger popped up in that list. You know, they're mostly fighting games. And, you know, they marketed a lot of peripherals towards fighting game fans, and one of them was the SG program pad, it was called. And, you know, you had the SN program pad, you know, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and of course, you know, it was basically a reworking of their SG controller, which looked really cool. It had, like, colorful buttons, not like the Super Nintendo, the Super Famicom did. You know, had colorful buttons for Sega Genesis controller. It looked cool, you know, looked like a Super Nintendo controller. However, you know, you could program moves into it, like, i.e., you could do a button press like, you know, Ryu Hadouken. You know, instead of pressing the button, you could program it into one of the side buttons over there. I didn't have this controller. It looked like one of the coolest things ever, and every kid kind of wanted one, but never really got it because, for whatever reason, you know, I grew up in a working class neighborhood. A lot of my friends were the same boat as I was. You know, we're not going out and buying, you know, $200 worth of video game stuff, you know, that
you're
made
really
great.
Used for like maybe 1 or 2 games.
Exactly. It's like, you know, we figured it out with the controller, and it became
let's
second
look at
nature.
it this way: if you're going to play it with Street Fighter, there's only 8 characters you can play as.
Yeah, well, 12 was
well
Turbo.
Now, and then when you go into Turbo, of course,
it
then
grew to
Super
12.
added another 4.
Another 4. It grew to 16. Here's the thing, though, with, you know, that controller. Supposedly it was extremely fragile. I was reading reviews. I did some research online about like some of these controllers. You know, this is from third-party info. This has nothing to do with my personal experience, but, you know, the one controller, the SG, broke extremely easy, and it wasn't the easiest, you know, process to program some of these moves into the controller. And number two, you know, obviously these are banned from tournaments because, you know, you have all the moves basically sitting right there. So you basically had to hit a button, and it was like you were programming a macro into the controller. It would perform it on the screen. Here's the thing with some of that, though. Like, it didn't... With Street Fighter 2 in particular, you know, some of the moves, like Guile's Sonic Boom and Chun-Li's spinning bird kick, and, you know, basically it required you to duck down for a few seconds or, you know, hit the back button for a few seconds. The computer could just launch these with impunity without even, like, charging it. Like, you know, it got to the point where at the harder difficulty levels, Guile was shooting off Sonic Booms before he could finish the phrase. Like, instead of hearing Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom, you hear Sonic, 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 Sonic Boom. You know, and it's just like two were coming at you.
You're too slow.
Yeah, so it made it impossible.
That just sounds like tournament and online play.
Yeah. But basically, at the same time, you know, these moves it required a charge. You had the controller, you know, the way they were marketing it, you were thinking that, yeah, you would just hit the button and it would work automatically like that. But in reality, no, it still had the charge in. It was just basically, all it was a sophisticated macro system that, you know, basically from a simple, like, PC program, you know, programmed it into a controller. You know, some basic
all
firmware.
That charging with Chun-Li kind of turned me off from playing as her. So
you know what? She was a beast in the first Street Fighter.
Oh yeah, and then they started adding more charge attacks. They gave her a fireball, and I mean, she always had the spinning bird kick, but because of the way
she was, I don't know. I played her more as like an aerial character, to be honest with you, because she had that move where she could jump off the side of the screen. And
I love that one.
I own tournaments with her.
Like what I would do is I would have Chun-Li like jump right off the corner, and then she had this move where like she would just like
stomp on your head, you know. And then, basically stay in
And I just basically did that across the...
Yeah, if you were good enough, you could stay in midair for about half the match, you know. But otherwise, you know, but again, these controllers, you know, they weren't making things any easier. You still had to perform a lot of the moves. Although, you know, with a joystick as opposed to a, you know, D-pad controller, I guess, you know, gave you the arcade experience. And if you played this game in the arcade multiple times, once you brought it home to the SNES, you had a Capcom Power Stick. You know, I guess it just felt more second nature. And that was like kind of the precursor to people building their own joysticks nowadays, you know, for all these systems. Alright, fast forwarding, we do cover the 240p era. This goes up to PlayStation and, you know, Sega Saturn. I want to talk about the travesty that was the first Sega Saturn controller. It was awkward, it had edges to it. The North American one I'm talking about, let's just clarify, not the Japanese. Had edges to it, and it was a piece of shit for Virtual Fighter and some of the other launch titles.
From what I hear, I've never used one personally, the shoulder buttons were extremely unresponsive, even more so than a Japanese controller.
And it's the fact that you have to hold it a certain way, you know? It's not like you're just holding a regular controller. It's, you know, you have to hold it a certain way for certain games, and it just felt awkward and uncomfortable. However, Sega saw the light, and the Japanese controller got a American release here. So, you know, that was a problem that was fixed fairly easy. Though I give kudos right now to the PlayStation 1 controller, which introduced pretty much every feature of modern controllers with the exception of the analog stick. That honor went to the Nintendo 64 controller. And I'm going to make a lot of you really unhappy right now out there in 240p land. I hated the fucking Nintendo 64 controller. Hated it. Please debate me on this one. Prove me wrong here. This controller was a piece of shit.
It worked for a lot of games.
I don't know. I didn't know a Nintendo 64. I was a PlayStation guy.
I had a 64.
Yeah. I don't know. Holding one, I was playing a GoldenEye tournament years later. Mind you, I have no problems playing retro games. Like, you know, I can pick up a controller right now and own anyone out there in a Doom deathmatch. Doom 1. Deathmatch. If it's still, you know, someone could get a server to get. I mean, you know, I doubt that's even possible these days. let's put it that way. Death matches, I'm still pretty damn good. GoldenEye, if I had a third-party controller, I would be great at that game. That was a fun game. Obviously, because we're still talking about it these days. However, that Nintendo 64 controller with the analog stick in some weird-ass spots was one of the worst mistakes I think Nintendo ever did. And you know what? I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for that one, because that's just my opinion, but I hated that fucking controller. Everyone's just being like, don't you talk shit about my N64 controller, it was the best controller ever. No, kid. Nintendo 64 controller was a piece of shit.
I'll fight you for that.
Alright, I want to hear your argument on this.
No, it was fine. I mean, it worked for a lot of games. For me, I'm usually of a muscle memory kind of person. It's just how my neuromotor skills work. But as soon as I got familiar with that, because I was always a Nintendo, so I would always move up to the next Nintendo system. But the N64 did take some getting used to, but it really... it really depends on the game. Like, I could kick your ass in GoldenEye because I know how to use that.
You probably could.
It could have been a good fighting game controller if fighting games actually came out for it, but...
They had...
Killer Instinct.
Yeah, they had Killer Instinct Gold, and I believe they had a Clay Fighter.
There was, Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, and Clay Fighter, and I think that's it. There was no Street Fighter.
About it. Oh no, Street Fighter had moved on.
Yeah, they went to CD gaming.
Yeah.
Because it was much cheaper to produce a CD, obviously, than a cartridge, so they put all their,
all their
good
fighters
games,
on there,
all the good fighters on the PlayStation and Saturn. But here's the thing with that controller, Ray, did you like the N64 controller at all?
It worked a lot for their first-party games, probably not so much for the rest of the library.
I'm going to share an experience. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I never owned for Nintendo 64. I actually got them for GameCube. They had that promotional release for the GameCube.
And how do you like using the items with that C-stick?
It was confusing at first, but I did kind of get used to it. The GameCube controller I thought was a lot better done than the N64 controller. It wasn't as awkward. It wasn't trying to be overtly different. That was the thing. Again, as Sonic the Hedgehog has proven, you could put a lot of buttons onto a controller. Really, if you can make a killer, spectacular game using a D-pad and one action button. So, you don't need all these exotic controllers. The GameCube controller is okay. I liked it better than the N64 controller. I still don't like it as much as the PS2 controller and eventually the PS3 controller, which is basically the same thing. And, once the Nintendo Wii came out, I think even Nintendo realized that, their controller was just getting a little out of hand. So, hey, motion activated, just like the Power Glove meant to be, only this one actually works, and works brilliantly. So that's why the Wii succeeded. However, going back a ways, N64 controller is still a piece of shit. But that's, again, my opinion that I'm going to receive a lot of hate mail for.
The funny thing is about the Nintendo 64 controller is I grew up with the Nintendo 64 Ocarina of Time, so that's the one that I played with.
Yeah.
Now that I'm going back and doing the stream for Ocarina of Time, which I actually owe you guys a part 3 for that, but I'm playing it with an Xbox fighting pad, and it's so different. It feels so different. I don't know what the C buttons are. As if you were watching my stream, you've seen me struggling playing the songs, like Zelda's Lullaby. I had to, when Impa taught me that song, I had to do at least 4 attempts to remember.
Yeah.
Which button did I assign for C? Which one did?
Because you had to, it's confusing when you had to map the controller buttons, and then you have to look at an actual controller.
I have a notepad next to me, and I wrote C up is the Y button or something.
I have a similar funny story to share. The very first stream, actually the very first thing we ever did for the 240p Club, when we recorded the very, very first podcast, we obviously took some time to edit. We launched it the week after. But as a preview, we hooked up an NES to my TV using Ray's technology at a up converter, and we tried to play Legend of Zelda. Now, this turned out to not be successful because my Zelda copy was absolutely filthy, had to be cleaned off, etc., etc. So we eventually, long story short, we caved and played it on emulator. And again, I apologize, but I don't feel as bad playing now on emulator because I own the actual cartridge. So henceforth, just played it on emulator. The NES was really responsive anyway. But the first few attempts we did of this, I played with Ray's Xbox One controller, which he had mapped to the emulator, and I could not, for the life of me, get past the first dungeon because this controller was just so awkward holding as I was playing an NES game. I'm sure if I was playing like a Call of Duty game, this would be like flawless.
Keep in mind, this is the standard controller for Windows 10 nowadays.
Yeah. Which I wasn't having any of it. I had a Repro USB NES controller, which, it was basically designed a piece of shit. The button stuck after a while. But you know what? I was able to get to level 9. I still owe you guys a stream to beat that because, we got so sleepy after, a long night of recording that we never finished it. But at the same thing, like the controller basically made my gaming experience there because I was so used to the old school D-pad that playing it with anything else aside from maybe the dog bone controller that the NES came out with later on, that I have one, it just felt too awkward. So that's like less of a thing where controller being a piece of shit and more you're so used to using a controller a certain way, holding a controller a certain way, that anything else just feels awkward. Again, Super Metroid, that's another one. You have to hold the controller a certain way to perform all the moves, like basically just jumping, shooting, and dashing at the same exact time required you to hold the controller a certain way. If I was attempting that with an SNES Advantage, I would scream out in pain and, probably have a lot more deaths than I should be having in a game that I've pretty much mastered at this point. But again, for Street Fighter 2, I'd probably have a better experience using an SNES Advantage, so again, after a few warm-up rounds. So, long story short, controller doesn't really make the player. However, it does go a long way, especially if you're used to one controller over the other.
It all comes down to neuroscience in the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
As someone who is looking to major in neurology and motor skills and all that. So.
Yeah.
Physical therapy.
So yeah.
Stuff.
There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll leave you with that little gem. We have a few news items to cover before we pull the stop button on our podcast tonight. Nintendo Switch released Nintendo is going to release a subscription service in September for the Nintendo Switch. It's reasonably priced. It's either $4.99 a month, I believe, or I think it was like $19.95 a year. And which is a great price to subscribe to anything, but it allowed you to basically upload your saves to the cloud space. So, if you have a SD card crash, you can still download the games you've purchased again. However, you won't lose your saves this time. Now, if you lose an SD card, you're going to lose your saves, which is depressing.
And what's going to happen to all these people who have been playing Splatoon 2 all this time? Are they going to have to, subscribe to this, too?
From Nintendo hasn't actually released that info yet. I'm not really sure of the answer to that. However, included with the subscription is at least a dozen NES titles from Nintendo that will be played on the Switch perfectly. Honestly, Nintendo didn't release more information on that. I'm sure the Super Mario series is included there, as well as a few other classics. Speaking of classic gaming, released on newer consoles at the end of this month, the Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 and 2 is going to be released for the Nintendo Switch finally. That's going to be released May 22nd. It's basically, you buy one cart, I believe it has Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 on it, and it gives you a download code to download 2. Much in the same way you bought Bayonetta 2 and it downloaded the first game for free as a digital copy.
I also think this is new as of, this recent podcast. Dark Souls is coming out for the Nintendo Switch. Does that mean you're going to be finally Does that mean you're finally going to be playing it, Joe?
Are you joining us in Dark Souls universe now?
Yeah, I'm going to crack that open and play it.
I think you'll enjoy it.
Thanks to the fact that the Nintendo Switch is portable, I can actually just sit down during my breaks and work or wherever I am and hammer out a level or two, if possible.
Please try not to break your Switch while you're playing.
Oh, don't worry, I won't.
As long as you realize that you're going to die a million times.
Fortunately, I have a very worthy third-party controller for the Nintendo Switch, which I reviewed on the website. By the time you are seeing this, by the time you're listening to this, you could head to the 240pclub.com page and check out our review section, which we just newly opened. I reviewed actually the SF30 Pro controller from 8-Bit Do Gaming, which was expensive, off Amazon, but it replicated a Super Famicom controller, and it's perfectly weighted, and it includes analog buttons. It works with a PS4, I believe, although the only systems I tested it on were the Nintendo Switch and the PC.
I once had a PS2 controller from Mad Catz or somebody made of glass. It broke within the first month.
I think that was just a poor decision from Mad Catz.
Yeah, definitely.
Although I give Mad Catz a little credit, they made a miniaturized Nintendo GameCube controller that worked pretty well. So, kudos to them.
Or maybe it could be an underlying brilliant idea, because if you break it, then you got to go buy another one.
Well, yeah, I think that's what they were banking on, really.
Right. But I mean, that's just asinine.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
To be fair, the vanilla PS2 controller was just as fragile, just not glass.
Yeah.
Well, did I ever tell you the time I dropped my PS2?
Oh, God.
It worked perfectly, though.
We will be reviewing the PS2 sometime in the future. Why? Because that's what we do. Basically, we review retro things and see if they hold up today. See what kind of factors would make your game more enjoyable. But also, one of the first reviews I wrote was for this controller. It was pretty good, and you'll read the review. I'm not giving the corporation a little too much plugging because they didn't pay us. Number one. Number two, there's some other excellent third-party controllers for your PC and for your Switch that work just as well. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, we're also being released for the Nintendo Switch in July, as well as all the other systems, including PC, on Steam, Xbox, PS4, Nintendo Switch, the Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1 and 2.
Yay!
Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 is going to be $20 as a digital download. I believe $40 for a physical copy that includes both. The first one is going to be Mega Man's X 1 through 4. The other one is going to be 5 through 8. Honestly, my best gaming experiences were with the X series for Super Nintendo. I loved these games.
I love the X series.
X and X2 were some of the best games ever released for the SNES. Not the best, but they'd be in the top 20 at least, both titles. Mm-hmm. Both independently awesome.
I've always... It might sound blasphemous, but I have always preferred the X series to the original. I like the original, don't get me wrong. But there's just something about the X series.
The X series had its own charm. It was brilliantly done. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I give it.
And I will actually be getting the Legacy Collection, so I'll stream it.
And review it, please.
Oh, yeah,
when it comes out. This is not till July, so we have plenty of time before that comes out. Mm-hmm. What other news items have...
I'm getting the Street Fighter Legacy Collection.
Yeah, that's the other thing that popped up, the Street Fighter Legacy Collection. It's basically Capcom decided, like some of their best projects, just release some of the old games for some of the newer systems, including this one is a collection that includes, if I'm doing this from memory, I'm not doing this from a webpage. I know it's original Street Fighter from 1987, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Street Fighter 2, and I believe it was Alpha, and was it Street Fighter 3 and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike?
I believe so. And then if you, I think if you pre-order it also, you get a free download copy of, I believe it was Arcade Edition of Street Fighter 4.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, which is one of my favorites. It had Poison in it, so I was really happy. I like playing as her.
Hey, remember when we tracked that down, that arcade in Canada?
Yeah, I think that was Vanilla Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, and like just a sit down arcade in Canada. Like we were wandering around Montreal, found it, threw in a couple of quarters or Canadian loonies or whatever.
I think I remember that was one of the very first builds of Tekken 7 also that I found there.
Yes.
Yeah, because that game may have come out last year here, but apparently in Japan it's been out for like 4 years.
So maybe it was like an import.
All I found
It might have been.
All I found in Japan's arcades was Dissidia.
Don't talk to me about Dissidia.
Yeah, Dissidia is that Square is
Dude, I have
releasing
no
hit
idea
after
what's
hit in
going
Japan.
on.
Let me tell you.
I have no idea what's going on in Dissidia. I downloaded the demo and I just wanted to play as Cecil. And
Cecil.
Cloud was okay. I played as him on one of my teams. I had a team of it was Cecil.
The red headband.
I think he had a red headband and tattoos on his chest.
Red headband.
Jacked?
Yes. And who was the third one I was playing as? I don't
really have too much experience with the City. I actually have one. I think the original one for PSP, which is it was a cool game. I never really got too far into it because fighting games really aren't my thing. Like they are, but they aren't. You can put me in front of Street Fighter 2, I'm gonna have some fun. Put me in front of an old Mortal Kombat machine, I'm gonna have some fun. You put me in front of a Street Fighter 5 machine, I'm pretty clueless. So,
dude, I was clueless with Street Fighter 5.
Yeah.
When I played Street Fighter Alpha, I played as Charlie. And when I play now, and I've been advocating for Charlie to come back for all this time.
He'll be downloadable content. Capcom's listening to us. They have our phones tapped.
Well, he's in Street Fighter 5, but they changed his moveset so much. Like I tried to do the motion for the spinny kick, the flash kick,
and they changed it.
I was like, what the hell? He starts doing some other move. I said, what the hell is this?
It's gonna take some time. You got to adjust it. Especially if you're used to doing it one way. Apparently, some of the changes not really for old school players.
At least Cammy still plays the same.
I heard the new God of War is kind of like that. They changed the control scheme, so old school players are going to be a little confused. But supposedly, it's getting all kinds of praise as like one of the games of the year. So, hey, if you have a PS4, it's a good game to pick up. We're not obviously going to be covering it here.
This is what he constantly says, apparently.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, we're not going to be covering it because, obviously that whole 240p thing, but it's a side project, go check that out. Anyway, for all of us at the 240p Club, I'm going to plug our sites before we go, so, Facebook.com/240p Club's been horribly underutilized because Facebook's kind of hit or miss.
Yeah, we usually just use Twitter.
Yeah, I use Twitter, but way more.
Some algorithm that's like not letting our posts show up in your feed or whatever.
Yeah, so just use Twitter instead, like most of the retro gaming scene apparently does. So you go to twitter.com, and we're Twitter at 240p Club, Twitch at 240p Club, which has been horribly underutilized, YouTube 240p Club, which has been utilized thanks to Ray's efforts. We have all 31 of our previous podcasts up and online on YouTube.
As well as every future one.
Yeah, every future one will wind up on YouTube at some point, so stick around, subscribe to our YouTube. This is also where we put all our old Twitch playthroughs. So if you want to see the Mega Man for Megapause from 2017, that was a fun day, glorious day.
Or if you want to laugh at my fails too.
Yeah, just turn it on. Just click on the link, check it out.
I will give you a Pilot Wings fails compilation.
Yes, actually, I'm going to do a whole fails compilation eventually. I just have to go through. It takes a lot of time because I have to go through all these videos, edit stuff out, like edit, click this, click that, and watch.
I could make it 10 times easier. Just give me a controller. And I'll give you a
we'll do that. We'll do the Pilot Wings fails. We're going to show my RBI baseball fail where I threw the ball into the crowd.
You could show my Pilot Wings 64 fails probably.
That too, definitely. But anyway, subscribe to all of it. The more you guys subscribe, the more you guys interact with us, the more we're inclined to put out some newer content, which we've been lacking on. So you're going to see a lot more content in the coming months now that we have summer to ourselves and we can launch a whole lot of things we've been chatting about. So from all of us to the 240p Club, I'm Metallic Joe.
I'm Ray.
I'm Nikki, and I promise I will never kick another baby Yoshi again.
I'm a baby Yoshi.
No, yeah, I don't know.
Moving on.
Alright, see y'all later at the next podcast. See you on your next adventures.
Bye-bye.